murdering her 5-year-old son Damon and was sentenced. A few weeks ago, 27-year-old Darlie Routier was convicted of murdering her 5-year-old son Damon and was sentenced to death by lethal injection. But unlike that other notorious mother, Susan Smith, Darlie Routier never confessed. She still insists she's innocent. At her trial, there were no eyewitnesses, no clear motive, and the evidence was entirely circumstantial. Routier's family has rallied around her. Her husband, the murdered boy's father, says the state has sentenced the wrong person to death. Tonight, in her first television interview, Darlie Routier tells Sylvia Chase her story. And you can judge for yourself.
Aside from a traffic ticket, Darlie Routier had never had a brush with the law. Now, she could be the first woman in more than 100 years put to death by the state of Texas.
Are you prepared to die?
I don't know if anybody's really prepared to die, but I feel like I know where I'm going and that I have Devin and Damon waiting there for me.
Devin, 6, and Damon, 5, Darlie's sons. Last June, they were brutally murdered.
How can anybody kill those babies? I don't understand it.
Devin was laying face up on the carpet with his eyes open, and the last thing that young boy saw in his lifetime was his killer, his mother, coming down at him with a knife.
I did not murder my children. I love them.
So it doesn't bother you that you have no eyewitness, no motive, no sense, and no confession?
She did everything to herself. She's put herself on death row because of what she did to those 2 children.
What happened in small-town Rowlett, Texas was unthinkable. Yet it began as just an ordinary night for Darlie Routier. Her husband and 7-month-old were asleep upstairs, and Darlie says she and her sons Damon and Devin had fallen asleep downstairs in front of the TV in the family room. Then, at 2:31 a.m., Darlie phoned 911.
911, what is your emergency? They just stabbed me in my cabin. What? They just stabbed me in my cabin. Who did?
The very first thing I hear is a glass break.
Darlie's husband, Darren, sleeping upstairs.
And then I hear a scream of Darlie screaming as loud as she can.
It came from the family room downstairs, where, remember, Darlie and the boys had fallen asleep watching TV.
I'm coming downstairs, running straight over to Devin. And when I get to Devin, there's these big gashes, and there's blood all over. And the very first thing I do is I go down on the top of him, and I'm patting him on the face, and I'm, Devin, Devin, Devin.
Devin was dead, stabbed twice in the chest with such force the knife went through to the carpet. Damon was stabbed too, 4 times in the back. He was clinging to life. And Darlie's throat had been slashed, nearly fatally. Yet she was frantically calling for help.
First thing I saw was blood on the floor in the entranceway to the house.
Officer David Waddell arrived within minutes.
And I could see Darlie Routier talking on the telephone. She was yelling, talking to the dispatcher, telling her that her kids were dying, that they had been stabbed.
She's saying this man went out, and he came in, and he killed the babies. And I mean, we're just freaking.
By the time paramedic Jack Colby got there,
I walked over to Damon and bent down and examined the child. And that's when he gasped. It was the last time that he would breathe on his own. Looked into his face, and his eyes were still open. I could still see that there was some life in those eyes. And I remember thinking that, this kid's a fighter and he wants to live.
Damon died before he reached the hospital. And Darlie might have died, except the knife stopped 2 millimeters short of her carotid artery. When she came out of surgery, police were waiting to question her. She was awakened, she said, by Damon, pushing on her shoulder, but in the dark didn't notice he was hurt. Then she saw a man moving through the kitchen and followed him as he went through a door and into the garage. She saw a knife and picked it up. Only then, she said, did she return to find Devin, who was dead, and Damon dying, and realized that she too was wounded.
Why did this happen?
Darren told police he was sure there had been an intruder.
For what reason? I said, well, she's beautiful. She's got hazel eyes, blonde hair, you know, beautiful body. Is it a stalker? He could have followed us where we live now.
There were leads. A suspicious black car prowling the neighborhood. An attempted break-in that night across town. But even as police assured Darren and Darlie they were on the verge of a breakthrough, authorities had already focused on the couple as prime suspects. It began with the murder weapon, a knife from the kitchen counter. Police felt Darlie was overly concerned about fingerprints on the knife.
Okay, it's all right. It's okay. We got the prints, baby.
An intruder could have done it. Looked like attempt suicide. Looked like she did it herself. You don't know.
James Cron, crime scene analyst, arrived before dawn. There were signs of an apparent struggle, and in the garage, a screen window had been slashed. But he immediately noticed what he calls red flags.
The thing that really drew my attention more than anything were the bloody bare footprints in the kitchen area that had broken glass on top of them.
But the glass wasn't bloody, and there was no blood trail from an intruder. Dust undisturbed on that windowsill, a gate that was difficult to open.
It's so many inconsistencies that everything she said that occurred that night does not fit anything at the scene.
I mean, could it be any worse?
Greg Davis, assistant district attorney for Dallas.
The evidence pointed one direction only, Darlie Routier.
Released after 2 days in the hospital, Darlie talked freely to police, not realizing that she was now the prime suspect. She and Darren spent hour after hour with detectives because they thought there was
nothing to hide. Why did we not ever get an attorney? You know, innocent people don't need attorneys. That's what I always thought.
Happy birthday to you.
Then, on what would have been Devin's 7th birthday, there at the graveside, Darlie spraying silly string.
I was in disbelief.
It was on the local news, and the prosecutor was watching.
If you knew Devin and Damon, you would know that they're up in heaven, and they're up there having the biggest birthday party that we could ever imagine.
What kind of cold individual can stand out there at a graveside and joke about children who have been killed 8 days earlier? And no grieving mother can do that, in my opinion.
Was that a turning point for you when you saw this?
It was.
This evening, investigators from the Rowlett Police Department arrested Darlie Routier.
4 days later, Darlie Routier was charged with capital murder.
We also believe that the wounds present on Darlie Routier were self-inflicted.
I said, is there anything that I need to know? And she said, Mom, I saw a man. I did not do this to the boys.
Meet Darlie Routier's mother, Darlie Key. She and her extended family have not wavered in their belief that Darlie is incapable of the crime.
You're telling me that a person who is normal, not violent, no mental illness, could cold-bloodedly kill her own children for absolutely no reason whatsoever. Doesn't make any sense to me.
Have you ever doubted your daughter-in-law?
Absolutely not a moment. Not a moment.
Darlie's mother-in-law, Cyrilda, has temporary custody of the surviving Routier son, 16-month-old Drake. He'd been sleeping upstairs unharmed the night of the murders.
Why do you think the family has stuck so close together here?
Because we all feel the same way. Number one, we love her. Number two, what they're saying is so crazy, it's so different from what Darlie we know in our heart. And then number three is the fact that things they're making statements we know better than.
Darlie went to trial in January in conservative Kerrville, Texas, and her character came under attack. One prosecutor called her family trailer trash. She was described as miserable in the depths of postpartum depression after her third son's birth, distraught because her husband's $250,000 a year computer business had fallen on hard times.
This is a woman who was used to a certain lifestyle, and she couldn't live that lifestyle the way she wanted.
What mattered, he said, were her possessions: the front yard fountain, the chandelier, the $9,000 spa, the jewelry. And she treated her children like trinkets, too.
They didn't know her. She was not selfish. She was not a self-centered person. She was very giving, very loving.
Darlie's attorneys insisted that she did not fit the profiles of mothers who kill their children. And they seized on a key piece of evidence, a sock found down the alley 3 houses from the murder scene. It was stained with the blood of both boys, but there was no blood trail leading to it. And remember, Darlie was bleeding profusely. In order to commit the murders, Darlie would first have had to stab the boys, then take that sock and plant it 75 yards down the alley. Then she would have had to return to the house, slit her own throat, and stage a phony crime scene. And all this, according to the timeline that night, within 2 to 3 minutes. But Davis says there was time enough.
But the facts weren't on their side.
And he ridiculed the notion that Darlie could have slept through her own stabbing. Darlie took the stand and said she remembered little of what happened that night. Well, then, she was asked, why had she written letters from jail saying, "I know who did it, and I saw him"? Caught off guard, Darlie dissolved in tears.
The real Darlie Routier came out, and you saw that as she got trapped in her own lies. Darlie Routier turned out to be one of our best witnesses.
After a 9-hour deliberation, the guilty verdict. But even going off to death row, she protested her innocence.
I didn't murder my children.
We continue now with the story of Darlie Routier, the young mother convicted of killing her own flesh and blood. Sylvia Chase went to the women's death row in Gatesville, Texas, where Routier began by reminiscing about her children.
Devin was always trying to make everybody laugh. He was always doing funny things, making silly faces. Damon was still at the age where he would let me hold him still. Oh, God. I miss him so much. I swear I did not murder my children, I swear.
So what did happen that night? Darlie and I discussed it earlier.
What woke you up?
My little boy, Damon. He was pressing on my shoulder, and he was saying, "Mommy." I sat straight up when he said that, and I saw the guy starting to walk away from me.
Her neck wound is still visible, yet she has no memory of the attack. At trial, even Darlie conceded it would be hard to sleep through it.
I know I didn't sleep through that. I mean, how would anybody sleep through something like that?
But yet you say you don't remember.
But I don't remember. Can you imagine waking up out of your sleep with a man attacking you?
Well, what do you think happened then if you can't remember but you don't think you slept through it?
I think that I tried to fight with a man, and I think that he either knocked me unconscious, or I think that when, you know, he slit my throat or whatever, I think I passed out.
The prosecution made much of Darlie's inappropriate behavior. For instance, the first policeman on the scene testified Darlie didn't seem concerned about Damon.
He's got his eyes open, and he's trying to breathe. I told her that she needed to help him, but she just wouldn't help him.
That's a lie. There's no other words to use. That's a lie.
She says she comforted Damon.
I told him to hold on. I told him to be strong. And he said, "Okay, Mommy." He shook his head. That was the last words I ever heard him say.
The prosecutor says, here is a woman who was depressed, gained weight, postpartum depression, behind in the mortgage, financially strapped.
I was a normal person just like anybody else. A normal mother that has normal, you know, just normal like everybody else, doesn't go to sleep, and all of a sudden just snap and become a psychotic maniac killer.
She's as cold-blooded as any person I have ever talked to, and I've spoke to a lot of cold-blooded people.
Bill Parker, a veteran interrogator who tried without success to get a confession out of Darlie. He insists she did say repeatedly,
If I did it, I don't remember.
You did apparently say during that interview with the policeman that if I did it, I can't remember.
No, I did not. I never said that.
Psychopathic. Person with absolutely no shame, no guilt, no remorse, no human compassion.
If I had done this to my children, I would be the first person to stand up and say, oh my God, I need help. What have I done? You know, a mother couldn't live with herself.
But now, Darlie, they're saying that you could live with it because you're a psychopath and that you could kill and not have a conscience
sure, that
about
fits
it.
their theory.
What really worked for the prosecution at the trial was this videotape of the party at the grave. I asked Darlie to look at it again.
Do you not say, as I do, oh, for heaven's sake, Darlie, chewing gum, smiling, spraying silly string,
Well,
and the jury wanted to see it over and over again? You still don't think it was wrong?
No. Maybe it's not the way that everybody would choose to do. But I can guarantee you the last thing a guilty person would do was to do that.
Your husband's mother said to me, you said to her, wouldn't you want to see the person who did this die? Do you remember those words?
I do. And I still feel that way today.
But if it's you who dies,
I know the truth. I know what really happened. I know that somebody else did this. So if I'm put to death, I'll leave this world with a free conscience.
When Darlie came from her cell to meet us, she was clutching a photograph of her only living child, her toddler Drake. She's not seen him since her arrest last summer, and no family contact visits are allowed on death row.
and should you go to your death, you'll never be able to touch him again?
That's right. I'll never be able to touch him again.
And so Darlie Routier asked us to record this videotape for her son. It's the hymn she used to sing to Drake at bedtime.
Loves me, ooh yes, Jesus loves me.